Now I know why I had that run to Sheets, and I had a feeling that I had to go somewhere, even though nothing, an outcome physically came from it. A very important mental thing came from it. So I did the Sheets thing, and I recorded something a couple of times ago on this phone. You know, I have had my spiritual experience, and that's no joke. And I'm basically spending the rest of my time on life seeing what I can do to help. Because there's really no question or no task or anything that needs to be done other than bringing the truth to the world and what we're doing here. I mean, these are the best words I can give it. Because it doesn't need anyone to give it any words. And this is what I mean. This is the reason I came out tonight. On the way back, we have a thing called the JCs. And right in front of it, in the center of the road, there was a deer, a doe, or a fawn. I'm not sure if it was just a fawn that might grow up to be a buck or would have grown up to be a buck. I don't think it's going to make it very far. Because it seems as if it got hit and it's still alive or disoriented, or it had eaten something or whatever. It was very disoriented. It didn't have any bruises or any signs of ailment, but it kept turning its head sideways and sort of leaning its head, like it's standing on all fours, and it would turn its head sideways and lean its head closer down to the ground with its eyes right on me, staring right at me in the eyes. Standing still, not getting scared, and all of a sudden it would get scared and it would sort of run around in circle, like if you were standing and you put your head to the side and tried to walk around in a circle with your head to the side. And it was sort of just walking around in a circle with its head down to the side. And I'm like, in the center of the road. In the center of the road. I literally got out of my vehicle and walked over to the deer, and I could have touched it if I would have moved fast, but I didn't want to startle it, so I moved slow, and it walked off the side of the road, and it walked behind another car, because there was another car sitting there looking at it, like wondering what the hell. And then it walked up behind his truck, and he left. And I just stayed there, and I watched the deer, and it was staring me in the eye for a good 20 minutes. And I was trying to, there was a part of me as a human being that was trying to shine my flashlight on it and get a camera thing of it and say, wow, guys, isn't this crazy? But then I realized if I was going to do that, because this was me and my spiritual side and my human side interacting at the same time. Like, here's my ego looking up, being like, oh, wow, get a video. This people wouldn't believe this. This is pretty cool. This is one of those unbelievable things. This deer is sitting here staring you in the eyes, and you're talking to it, and it makes a lot of sense to you because you can see the total blackness in its eyes. It's totally not unconscious, but it's totally one with nature. One. There is no separation at all. It didn't have people giving it ideas to say that this is what you're supposed to do with life. It just was born, lived, and dies. That's what we do. We're born as people, we live as people or human beings, and then we die. Nothing in between is substantial other than what your spirit is learning. And your spirit does hold that. You are the Akash. You are just Kash. You're Akashi. The Akashic is that who is Kashi. A cause is C-A-U-S-E. A K-A-S-H is Akash. When a cause becomes kinetic. When a figurative concept of an idea becomes the kind of thing it is. That's what Akash is. It's a real thing worth value. It's a real thing that happens that you can save up. It's not the cache that stores up on your computer. It's not the cash that you put in your wallet that's just some dead trees shaved into thin pieces of paper. It's the Kash. It's what you really take from things. It's what your spirit learns. It's why we called it the Akashic Records. Because the Kash is what you learn as each individual person. And after you die and go back to that, Akashi is what you call all the storage of the things you've done throughout all your lives. That's what it's called. All different Sanskrits and all different teachings have different ways of saying it. But that's what it is. And it doesn't matter if anyone gets it because that's the words they heard. I'm telling you what the words are. I invented them. I saw it. And I didn't say them in word. I said them in symbol. And those symbols could not lie to ourselves. No matter how many of us there are, no matter how many of us there will be, these symbols will not lie. I made them for this reason. And now I'm trying to reinterpret them as me. with I inside of Dan. And that sounds wild, but that deer standing there with its head on the side, okay, finally it went off the side of the road. And it stood there on the side of the road, and it just kept, like, lifting its head up. Its ear, one ear would move around, and it would look at me, and it wasn't injured. And I don't think it had a problem with its mind. I think there's a tower at the end of the road, which is a 5G tower, and here's me, who had a very enlightening experience 3 years ago, before the towers came, and I think my frequency and whatever, this sounds really wild maybe, I'm sure it does, but I get into crazy zones where I know things that are just weird, that most people be like, you couldn't have known that from somewhere, and then when I say it to them, they'd be like, but that's true, it's gotta be, I know that to be, that makes complete sense. I've never heard anything that made more sense. Not even in human terms, just in life. And I'll say that kind of stuff, and people will be like, wow, yeah. But then they'll be so worried about their job or whatever, they'll go right back to that because it just seems like another subject. But it's not a subject. The truth is the only truth there is. The other things that you do with your creative mind that you don't think is creative, if you're at work putting stuff on a shelf, that's creative. Because you're a human being, or you're a living thing thinking you're a human being who thought you got a job, who got hired by someone who thinks they're your manager, who goes out and puts things on the shelf that you think people want, but they don't. People think they want it, but they don't. They're just looking for some kind of thing that makes them understand what they are. And here I am, but they're not going to look at it. And when I say stuff about a deer looking me in the eyes and turning its head and being all confused, like the thing I was trying to say to the guy that was in the truck, I was like, it looks like it got hit, but it's totally fine, and there's no marks on the ground. It's not bloody or hurt looking. It's not limping. It's just walking around in circles, confused. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it's almost this weird feeling I had earlier when I was before I went to go shopping. Like, I felt like I had to go do something. I felt like I had to go somewhere. And what I do, I drove a little bit out into a thing, and I came around in a circle back to here. Like, that's not the same thing. But there's some weird shit going on in the atmosphere around here. Because I'm changing the things around me. I have a hard time having a conversation that's more than a few words because all the words we go to talk about are just nonsense. They're all just things that don't make any sense. Like, so the word nonsense truly is. It doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to, let's say, no objective nature. Non-objective nature. You can't say non about non. So we'd say no objective or no object in nature. So it's either non or it shouldn't be. You know, so it's like those are symbols. An uneven symbol, a circle that is rounded, and an uneven symbol. It's not going to work. So it equals uneven. So non. So when you say nonsense, it makes no sense to focus your thinking, your eyesight, your hearing, your taste, or your feelings on anything that you shouldn't have in your senses. That includes the food, the things you watch that you know that you shouldn't do or think about, and the things that you think, which when you do them, you catch them, and you work on getting those things out of your mind, and even if they're just a thought, don't hold the thought against yourself, but eventually those thoughts will dwindle away to be just little fizzles, and they won't matter much. Now that deer taught me a lot in a few minutes. I was there for maybe 15 minutes looking at it and talking to it, saying I love you and that you're going to be okay. If you're scared, if you're injured, then lay down. Just lay down and everything will be okay. Something will come and get you. And I don't mean to sound weird, but we're human beings and we're so scared about dying. Like an animal right now is wandering in the dark without a flashlight, doing whatever it can. But it's got dark eyes and it can see a little better, and I've actually seen what it's like. But there's a little bit difference of a world between the human being and every other living thing, and every other living thing between it and every other living thing. It's pretty interesting, and it's pretty amazing. And when you know it, like I can't look out of my eyes and see like a deer sees, but I can go into a vision and I can actually see the way a deer sees. And I know that's how a deer sees, because I've been it. When you've been a person who's walked across the tightrope, someone who hasn't but watched it on TV can't explain it to you. When I've been the guy on the tightrope, I can explain it to not only myself, but everyone else, because I was the guy who did it. So when I'm talking about this stuff, when I say I'm the guy, that sounds physical, like the physical world. I am the being, the spirit that did this. So are you. But you fell into the person that you've been for a little while. And you let your timed lifespan take over who you really are. And you've allowed people to make you think that if you talk like that, you're crazy. But they're the ones who are crazy if they think they're their name and their business. and their job and their money. If they think they're that, they are the most crazy people. They are an artificial bit of walking flesh who's programmed themselves to think money is valuable, and programmed themselves to think that the words that they say, or the clothes that they wear, or the portfolio they represent means something. That's all just thought. And when someone thinks it does, sure, it means something to the people who think it does. But when you stop thinking, thinking doesn't matter. Being accurate and proper to each other, being truthful to each other is what matters. You would stop while you're dressing up in fancy clothes and trying to impress and trying to appeal to your inner you by appealing to the outer you, just like people who go to space to try to understand what we're all about and don't go inside. And maybe they do go inside, but they haven't taken the time to do it rightly, or else they wouldn't be out in space. And if, they'll be like, but you don't, I've studied this and I've studied that. That's human stuff. That's all people stuff. And I don't care how deep you think your mind is thinking by going out into space and doing something. You're not doing anything. Nothing. If we get to the point where it looks like this earth is going to blow up and then go to the next existence, let it happen and watch what your soul does. You will be fine. It's like someone who is afraid to jump off a diving board because you don't know how deep the water is or something like that. And you dive into the water and it feels so exhilarating, and then you burst back out. Wow, that was awesome. Like, that is literally what death is like. So when that heat of that sun flies over, because your skin makes you think that hot is scary or fire is painful, only the water with feeling. More water than land, and more land than fire. So yeah, fire is the highest one up there that we think. Of course it's not. Thought is. But that thought fire is a different one. But you picture a wave of superheat that will instantly flash and dry all the water. Don't imagine it too hard. But let's say, figuratively, that would hurt. You're a body of water that will feel that slow drying out and that whatever. But if it didn't happen so slow, it would be fast. Just like if it's cold, if you put cold spots on your body, like one by one by one, if you put an ice cube down your arm. But if you dive right in and your whole body gets it at once and comes out, your body adjusts faster. And then your mind can go, okay, I did it, I'm okay. Instead of being like, oh, a little bit more, oh, a little bit more, oh. It keeps expanding and keeps prolonging the actual part of it. I wouldn't say go dive into dying. Right now we're alive to learn these things for our spiritual purpose. So now what we do is we dive into learning how to think right. And even if there's a comet flying at the earth going to bust us and blow the earth up, you would still practice. Everybody in the earth would hopefully get into the point where they're thinking, all right, man, everything comes down to thought. And if that's true, and if we're going to die, we should all sit and think as consciously as we can of love and picture that thing disintegrating or not happening, and see what happens with the mind. And what happens would amaze you. I've seen it. That's another existence, but it doesn't make sense to talk about here. But when you have the infinite mind, when you are the Godhead, you've seen every galaxy. You've been every reality. And not only that, it is your experience. It's not something you're making up. In fact, it is something you made up before time. Before your existence as a human being right now, and before anyone who's hearing it. It's pretty crazy, but it's the only truth there is. And right now you're doing the same thing. You just refuse to grasp it or believe it. You're still stuck on the ego world. Or even if you're one of those people who's halfway in between, you're like, I'm not my body, I'm not my ego. But this makes no sense that I'm in this body right now and this guy's telling me about the truth that I am, this being that has no body and that is more impressive than a most powerful ball of fire, more impressive than the largest cosmic ball that is 10 billion times the sun. We are more powerful than that, way more powerful than that. That's like saying if an ice cube was extremely cold, negative 10,000 degree ice cube, and you dropped it in the fire, of course there'd be some reaction. But let's just say, no matter how ice cold an ice cube is, if you drop it in the fire, it's going to melt. Or else it's at least going to take a second to, it's going to have to go through the process of thawing and whatever. But if you drop it in the fire, it's going to melt. That big ball of fire that could be the 10 billion times the sun, When it goes into what you truly are, it instantly freezes. It's all cool. Fire isn't that big of a deal. You just, with your mind, wanted to think, how big and intense and vast could things be? And there you have it. Everything that's big and vast and everything is right out there when you look out at the sky. When you look out at the sky a couple times a day, you'll realize that you did this. We did this, I did this, so long ago. And right now at the same time. And it keeps updating. Like we have computers that update, we have people that update, we have animals that update, we have rocks and trees and plants that update. Don't you see that? And when they're getting tired of updating in this form, they spread off to make another one, to remind themselves of what they once were in that form, to keep holding on. I'll keep holding on and growing. Fermentation. You're forming and you're mentating. You're forming, you're thinking, and you're having it happen. Fermentation. Firm, fur, as in fur, you're starting to form. You're becoming into a four. Your force is coming into firmness, so you are fermenting. You are menting. The mind in action. Things happening on an individual level expressing. Or an extreme level expressing. It could happen on many individual levels at one time because there is only one. But this can happen in many facets. Many things at one time are an individual expression. But they're individual expressions in a world of seeming like more than one. And then you have ation, the act of doing. So it's form, mind, doing. Or force of mind, doing. Fermentation. That's what happens. It's doing it without you thinking you're doing it. It's doing it through memory of what it once was so it can do it again. It's the light in the dark dancing upon itself and playing that same trip again. But we can add things to the next trip by becoming more conscious. And we are definitely doing that, my friends and family. We are definitely doing that. Till next time.